Hey guys, in this section we're going to be talking about light. We're going to talk about categories of light, so light quality, types of light, shapes that we use, right? So shapes and sizes and why is it important. Then we're going to talk about how to use light, distractions, temperature and exposure. We're also going to talk about blender lights in depth. So in this video we're going to focus on quality of light. And I'm going to talk about ambient light, artificial lights, about direct light, indirect light, about bounce light, reflections, diffuse light, hard light, and so on and so forth, and also cold light and warm light. So first of all, what is an ambient light? Ambient light is any type of light that's natural. So for example, sunlight, like here, an ambient light would be the light that comes from the HDRI. That's an ambient light. These two are artificial lights, okay? So only because we're talking about Blender and we are in Blender and we kind of using a texture to light this, we're still using a texture, so HDRI texture that's been shot outside in the natural world, so that's a natural light. So ambient light would be sunlight, moonlight, candlelight, fire, etc. Now, artificial lights would be anything else. However, if you're in a room and let's say it's dark and the only light in that room is let's say a nightstand light, that's also an ambient light. So ambient light technically is any light present in a scene that is essential for that scene to be lit. And then any other lights like strobes, flashes, additional lights, etc., these are additional lights, they're not ambient lights, okay? Ambient light and artificial lights can have different qualities. They can be direct, can be indirect. They can be hard and can be soft. They can be cold, they can be warm. They can be, reflected, but can be, not reflected. So we're going to talk about all of these. So let's talk about direct light and indirect light. Direct light is any light that comes from a specific source and shines directly onto your object. So for example, all these lights in the scene would be direct lights. However, if I move this light a little bit further away and grab this light and lower this HDRI to something like 0.1, right? And I grab this light and move this light and a cube closer to, this wall here, and grab this light and rotate it on x-axis here, like this. And I'll grab this plane here and, made it a little bit less metallic and maybe, more rough like that, and I pumped more light into this spotlight, so let's say 7000, right? Now any light that bounces from this wall back onto the cube, that's a reflected light, and that could be a very powerful technique if you know how to use it. And you can use it with any type of light. So let me remove this light for a second. Let me rotate this plane like this, and let me go back here to strength 1. Now watch this. If I'm gonna grab this cube and place it somewhere here, right? Let me just rip this face off here. So P and selection, there we go. And I'm going to change color of this plane to something darker, right? But maybe not metallic, all right? And a bit more less reflective, something like this. Let's make it darker, right? Cool. And this cube is lit from this side because even though this HDRI has very overcast sky, which means the light technically comes from everywhere, okay? But there's a slight direction to it because it comes from over there, right? It doesn't come from over there. Clearly, the sun sets over there. So that's the brightest spot in the sky, which means light coming from over there is going to be the brightest one. So anything that light shines on from that direction, like here, is going to be brighter than the light shining here. However, what you can do, you can use something called a reflector to reflect light back onto your object. Look at this. Seeing this? And you can adjust the brightness and darkness of it. You can change the reflector into a flag. Flag is the opposite of reflector. Flag is going to absorb light. If you're going to put something really rough, okay, and black, it's going to absorb all the light because light will not bounce at all, right? So you're going to make it even darker. So you can either create a flag or a, bounce card, okay? And the light will bounce back. That's a reflected light. And this light could be diffused because in this case we are reflecting diffused light, or could be actually hard when the surface is very reflective, like a mirror. Mirror could reflect sunlight back into an object, and you will have an illusion that you have two suns in a scene, because it will literally reflect the entire sun. There's no diffusion at all, right? Because mirror, there's no roughness to it, okay? It's just very minimal roughness, do you know what I mean? So you can actually have a reflected light that's going to be very, very hard. Now, what's the difference between these lights, right? Okay, let me show you. So if I'm going to expand this a little bit, and I'm going to click here, Control T to add additional node group, and I'm going to cancel that and load in here an HDRI that's actually, you know, sunny. So let's say this one. And I'm going to plug it into color. There we go. So now what I want you to do is look at this shadow here. Look how crisp it is, right? Very crisp and defined. Why? The reason why sun is producing such a harsh shadow is because relatively to, you know, our object, the sun is a very small source of light, even though it's a huge star. Because it's just a small dot on the sky. It's kind of like a flashlight, okay? Whereas, for example, if I switch it back to this diffuse light here, okay, you'll see that the shadow is very soft, and basically you can barely see that because the entire sky is a light source. It's huge. So light is coming from every single direction, right? Which annihilates these shadows. So a small source of light will create very hard shadows, whereas the big source of light will create soft shadows. And you can very easily reproduce that in Blender. So if I'm going to add a light here, so I'm going to add a light, okay, so let's say spotlight, and I'm going to move it somewhere here, right, above this cube and direct it towards it. Then I'm going to increase, you know, the power here to 700 watts. And I'm going to turn this thing off. Well, actually, let's make it 7,000, okay? There you go, that's better. So look how hard this shadow now is, right? And when I'm going to be changing the radius of the light to make it even smaller, you know, you're going to receive a really, really, really hard shadow, just completely unrealistic, right? Then you can use the blend feature here, and you can also use the radius feature to change the size of the light, which will impact the quality of a shadow. So if you want to have something more soft, you know, then you want to go with a larger source of light. So if you have, for example, a soft HDRI, you want to mix it with soft lights to make it make sense. And then you also want to, you know, blend colors together, because light, not a quality of light, is color. Light can be warm or could be cold. So if you're going to go back to our example here, we're going to go back to our HDRIs here. If I'm going to plug that in, right, you can clearly see that this is a cold light. It's a lot of blue in it. So if you're going to open this Kelvin temperature scale, you can see clearly here that the shade or heavily overcast sky is really, really cold, because the higher you go on Kelvin scale, the colder the light becomes, okay? We're going to be talking about this in the next video, by the way. So in this case, the sky is probably around, you know, 9,000, 9.5K, something like this, okay? It's really cold. So if I'm going to plug in the sun then, right, you'll see how warm the light is. Now the light is really warm because, you know, sunlight, it's like 5,000 Kelvin, okay, or 5.5K, something like that. So half of the previous image is really warm. So what you want to do is you want to match the light you're using, right, the temperature with the light on the sky or wherever the light is coming from. So if I, for example, wanted to match, you know, the light of this overcast, right, with the light that I'm casting on this cube, what I would do is, let's just drop it to maybe 0.5 so you can actually see the lighting, right? What I would do is I would select this color here and either, you know, sample color from the sky somewhere here, right? Or what you could do is use nodes in cycles. You're going to be in cycles for that. Go to color, black body, and you could choose Kelvins here. You can see here there's only 1.5K. Look how warm this light is. It's basically red. So change it to, let's say, 9,000, right? And boom, you got a cold light. That's maybe a bit too cold. Let's say 7,000, okay? This is very close to what, you know, what we have in a scene, right? And we could probably have to drop this one to 0. That's going to be a good idea, like this, right? So you can match the color of your ambient light with your artificial light by using blackbody, okay? But you need to be in cycles. Now, do you have to match them? No. Do you need to use all the lights of the same color? No. You could, for example, pop some red light behind this cube. So if I'm going to, pop a cursor here and add a point light and move this point light here behind the cube, change it to, let's say, I don't know, 3000, okay? And I'm gonna switch the color here to something warm. You're gonna have two colors in a scene. One of them is gonna be bluish and one of them is gonna be reddish. But, if you want to create more colors, you need to be very subtle with it. You need to be very conscious of it and, really know what you're doing in terms of mixing lights, because in most cases it doesn't work, okay? This is why, for example, in photography, we have a white balance setting where we actually set colors, and we usually avoid situations where, for example, you're shooting a picture inside and someone is sitting near a window and there's a very warm light inside and there's an overcast outside. What's going to happen is that if you have a warm light inside of the house, part of the face is going to be warm, and the window light, which let's say is going to be an overcast day like this one, going to cast a very cold light from the other side. So you're going to have a face with two colors. It's going to just look weird, okay? So if you want to mix colors, that's cool. But just don't overdo it, okay? So these would be the main qualities of light, okay? So again, you have ambient light and artificial light. You got direct light and indirect light, okay? Then you got soft light and hard light, and you got, bounce light, diffuse light, and all these, okay? And you, of course, have cold light and warm light. So remember about these qualities of light and, use them accordingly. For example, soft light is fantastic for portraits. Why? Because it produces such a soft light. Like you see here, this light is extremely soft and simply, creates a very smooth skin, eradicates any wrinkles, and is very popular for photography. This is why, for example, if you shoot outside on a sunny day, we use diffusers, which means we place like a massive white round piece of cloth between the face of a model and the sun. So when the sun shines through this cloth, it diffuses, and you get very warm light, but it's diffused, okay? Now, hard light is fantastic for architecture because it will make all the textures pop. And you want it to pop because you don't want it to look mellow. You want it to look aggressive, you want it to look well-defined because it's artificial and it's artificial angles. A lot of 90 degrees angles, which don't exist in nature. And a lot of textures, very strong textures, and sunlight, especially angled one, will make them really pop, like during sunset or sunrise. When you look at the sunset or sunrise, you know that, we have all these beautiful defined shadows, like in this, in this image here, right? You can see all these, there's a massive difference in terms of light stops, so in terms of measurements of light, between highlighted features of this image and shadowy features of this image, because the difference between shadow and highlights on a sunny day is about 3 to 3.5 stops, which is huge. Now let's go to camera and I'll show you how much 3 stops of light can dim or brighten the image, okay? So we are in neutral now. I'm gonna dial here +3, look at this, that's +3 stops of light, and that's -3 stops of light, okay? Do you see what I mean? So 3 stops of light, it's a massive shift in light strength, which is why pictures shot on sunny day with a really steep angle look so powerful, because the contrast is so strong, right? You don't want that in portraiture, because in portraiture you want something that's soft, usually, but there are exceptions. But, portraiture usually shot in very soft, kind of a diffuse light, okay? So that's all you need to know about qualities of light.